For this assignment, you'll be using painting to complete the worksheet, and you'll need the following materials: your primary and secondary colors, a mixing palette or disposable plate, cup of water, paper towels, and a paintbrush. Before painting, fill in the answers for questions 1 through 6. Before we start painting this worksheet, let's answer numbers 1 through 6, and this should be fairly easy to do. When you're working with your tertiary colors, remember that the primary color is always going to be the first start of the name, and then it will follow with the secondary. It's very simple. All right, so our first one is red plus orange will equal red-orange. Essentially, all you're doing is recopying the words down. Number 2, yellow plus orange equals yellow-orange. Number 3, yellow plus green equals yellow-green. Number 4, blue plus green equals blue-green. Number 5, blue plus violet equals blue-violet. Number 6, red plus violet equals red-violet. So for this worksheet, you are allowed to use your primaries and your secondary paints. And the first thing I like to do, and this is just like it was in the primary and secondary worksheet, where you have up top, you're going to be having the primary color, and then at the bottom of this oval, you will have the secondary color, and in the middle will be your tertiary color. Okay, so what I like to do at first is just paint these top parts. You don't need the mixing palette to do any of these. There should be 2 for each one. So it's best if, what I like to do is just kind of go through each color one at a time and placing those on there. So I'm going to start off with my primaries. Open up all these little containers. They're a little bit difficult. Okay. So let's start off with our primaries. And we're going to start off with red first. Just a little bit of red will do. And this one's marked red. And over here in the far little number 6 is marked red. So you're going to fill in those spaces with the red color. Make sure you rinse off your brush once you've got those filled in. And let's move on to our next primary color. I'm going to do blue since that's the next one in my little cups. So again, you're going to have 2 of these spaces. So it's going to be number 4 and number 5. So fill in those top parts with the blue hue. Make sure you thoroughly rinse that brush, especially now that I'm going to be moving on to the yellow. I know this is, I'm constantly saying this, but it's imperative that you do this, making sure that you thoroughly clean that brush, especially when you're moving on to a lighter value or a lighter color, such as yellow. You don't want to contaminate it. It's easily contaminated. So you're going to have 2 places that have the yellow, and that's going to be number 2 and number 3. So fill in those top parts with the yellow color. All right, so all of the top parts of our ovals have been completed with the primary colors. Let's move on to our secondaries. So I did mention that you are allowed to use your secondary colors for this worksheet. So I'm going to open those here, the orange, the green, and the violet. And we're going to pretty much do the exact same thing that we did with the primary colors by placing them in their appropriate spots on the bottoms of these ovals. Thoroughly rinse that brush. Make sure it's nice and rinsed. Get off any excess water and color on your paper towel. And again, you don't need to be using the mixing palette just yet. We can use straight from the containers. So I'm going to start with the orange. And it looks like our number 1 at the bottom and our number 2 at the bottom are both going to be done with the orange. So fill those in. Thoroughly rinse that brush. Make sure you get all that excess paint off. And let's move on to our next color, which will be green. And that looks like the bottom of number 3. And the bottom of number 4 will both be with the green. Fill in those spaces. Rinsing my brush, getting ready to move on to my last secondary color, which would be the violet. And it looks like the bottom of number 5 and the bottom of number 6 are both going to be with the violet. Fill in those spaces. All right, so we've got both our primaries and our secondaries filled in on the worksheet. Now it's time to start creating our tertiaries. So you will need your mixing palette or your disposable plate to mix your values or your colors. And our first one that we're going to do is the red-orange. So we will start off with a little bit of the red. Get that scooped up on the side. And I'm going to make my red violet too because we need the red for the red violet. So I will do that. And another one. I'm going to keep these in order so that I can remember, which one I'm working on. Thoroughly rinse my brush. And I'm going to set all of these up before I mix them. Just kind of save myself some time. Now you can go one at a time if that's what you prefer, but I'm just going to do it this way. So I'm sticking with my primaries, moving on to the blue, and it's going to be for the blue violet and the blue green. So get me some blue, blue violet, blue green. I'm just going to hold this. Rinse my brush. Thoroughly, thoroughly, thoroughly. I'm moving on to my yellow tone. So you can see I'm doing red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and red, violet. Just so you know how I'm working. All right, moving on to my yellow. Good scoop in there. I tend to undermix. Don't put enough paint in there. I'm just trying to be sparingly, or use it sparingly. All right. Moving on to my secondaries. So now I'm going to work with my orange. Scoop it in there. Oop, almost took too much. Thoroughly rinse my brush. Move on to my green. And take a look at your water at this point. What do you see? It's getting kind of a murky color, a brown. And now theory will say that what happens when all light is put together, everything's put together, it's supposed to turn black. It turns more like a muddy brown color, not necessarily black. But when they all work together, they will make a black color, or I'm sorry, a muddy color. All right, so we've got our yellow green. Let's do our blue green. Thoroughly rinse, and this will be our last one. That's why I just like doing all of this right now, so I don't, I feel like it saves me time. Who knows? I just personally feel like it does. And our last one is going to be our violet. All right. Now that we've got those all placed out, it's time to start mixing them. Okay, so starting off with my red orange. Remember, I always like to keep the paint up at the top, and I can always add more into my mix as I go. That looks pretty good. Just looks like a richer orange color, and that's kind of what you want. It's a nice blend between the two. Next will be our yellow-orange. You might, if you've been, I have a really small glass I'm using for my water. So if it gets too murky for you, pause and go clean that up and get some fresh water. I think I'm going to have to do that. I've got my fresh water. My brush was getting quite yucky. I wasn't thoroughly cleaning it. Okay. Yellow, orange. Just mix these colors together. You probably want more of that yellow than you do of the orange. So I'm trying to avoid my orange deposit. I think I got way too much orange in there, so I'm going to go scoop up a little bit more yellow. It doesn't, it's subtly different, but I'd like to see a little bit more of a change in that. So I'm going to scoop up some more yellow. Notice as I'm not going back over into this area because I don't need much paint. And I just deposited that yellow there, and I don't want to have to mix it all in. It's going to dilute that yellow even more. So let's see how that looks. That's better. Again, it's real subtle, but I can see it more versus what it was a minute ago. Scooping up my color closer to the yellow section. Take your time with these. Try to keep them as clean as you can. I'm going to be judging you on if you can, have good craftsmanship. And by craftsmanship, I mean it's not all around out here in the border. Occasionally, you can see right here where I've flicked it out, and that happens. Or I've gotten over here, I've gotten out of the border just a bit, and that happens. But I don't want to see, sometimes I've seen chaos where this thing is just, nobody tried to stay in the lines. And good craftsmanship is about following the lines, staying in those spaces, keeping it good and crisp. I want to see that kind of thing. All right, next one, yellow-green. Now remember, our yellow is our lighter value. Green is a much darker value, so I'm not really bringing a lot of that green over from the side over here. I'm just bringing in a little bit, and I can always come back and get more if I need it. I'm really staying and mixing up towards my yellow section, and that's going to be better for me. If I drag this green into here, it might get too dark, and it would be more on the green side than the yellow-green side. Okay. There's a good amount. So in my space, fill this up. Looking good. Rinsing our brush thoroughly. And moving on to the blue-green. Animal hair. My house is just filled with animal hair. Gets everywhere. It's just on my paper. My cat, he tends to come in here and sit in my chair when I'm not here. Most likely, it looks like he might have gotten up on my desk. There's evidence. He's so nosy. Okay. It's good and nice. That's more on the blue side. I didn't really take a lot of green on here, but it's still, it is a blue-green, so it suits it. All right. Almost near the end, home stretch here. And we've got the blue and the violet. Love this value. Love this hue. I keep saying value. You can say value. Every color has a value. I should be using more art term or color terms, and that would be hue. So I like this hue. It's very pretty. Filling in these spaces. There we go. And then we're gonna do our last one, and that's gonna be our red violet. So in this one, we can clearly see the red is a lighter, has a much lighter value than the violet does. So we're gonna use more of it, more of the red than the violet tone. So I bring a little bit of that violet into the red, still keeping them separated for the most part. There we go, mixing them together. It gives it this dark raspberry color, and that's what you want to see. Very pretty. I tend to like the cool tones. Attract those more. Even though red violet is a warm tone. This is all right. And there we have it. There are our tertiary colors.